Imagine flying over Mexico's coastline, nearly 5,800 miles stretching along the Pacific Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean Sea. These waters, part of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, frame Mexico's shores, from the rugged cliffs of Baja California to the tropical beaches of the Yucatan. Now, picture what you'd expect to see below: thriving ports, sprawling beach cities, coastal highways, connecting it all. But that's not what you'd find. Instead, you'd see something strange. Mile after mile of empty beaches, small villages, and untouched wilderness. Mexico's coastline is surprisingly barren. This isn't normal. Countries with extensive coastlines typically build their biggest cities along the water. Think New York, Rio de Janeiro, Shanghai, Sydney. But Mexico, its powerhouse cities, Mexico City, Guadalajara, Monterrey, all sit hundreds of miles inland, hidden away in valleys and mountains. So what happened here? Why did Mexico turn its back on the sea? Today, I'm going to show you the fascinating reasons behind one of geography's strangest puzzles and what it reveals about history, economics, and the hidden forces that shape countries. First, we need to understand the land itself. Mexico's Pacific coast is absolutely brutal for development. For hundreds of miles, the Sierra Madre Mountains crash directly into the ocean, creating dramatic cliffs but almost no flat land to build on. Even today, building here is a nightmare. Roads have to snake through treacherous curves and steep drops. Towns are squeezed into tiny pockets of flat land between mountains and sea. The Baja Peninsula isn't any better. It's mostly desert with little fresh water and few natural harbors. Building cities here means importing almost everything you need just to survive. On the Gulf side, the challenges are different but equally difficult. Much of this coastline is swampy, low-lying, and extremely vulnerable to flooding during hurricane season. Cities here don't just get damaged, they can completely disappear underwater. And the Yucatan Peninsula? The entire region sits on porous limestone riddled with underground rivers and sinkholes. The ground itself is unstable for large structures. Compare all this to Mexico's Central Highlands. Elevated plateaus with fertile soil, natural protection from storms, and a mild climate perfect for agriculture and urban development. The geography isn't just inconvenient, it practically dictated where Mexico's cities would grow. Look at Mexico City. Sitting at 7,350 feet above sea level, it enjoys spring-like temperatures year-round. Meanwhile, coastal cities like Acapulco regularly endure temperatures above 90 degrees Fahrenheit with crushing humidity. Before air conditioning, the choice was obvious for anyone who could afford to live inland. But Mexico's empty coastline isn't just about difficult terrain, it's also about history. When Spanish colonizers arrived in the 1500s, they weren't looking to build beachfront property. They were searching for gold, silver, and powerful indigenous empires to conquer. Their biggest prize was Tenochtitlan, the breathtaking Aztec capital built on an island in Lake Texcoco, high in the Central Valley. After conquest, it was transformed into Mexico City, instantly becoming the crown jewel of Spain's American empire. From there, the Spanish established more cities across the highlands: Puebla, Guadalajara, Querétaro, each fortified against attack and connected by rugged inland roads. Meanwhile, the coastline was essentially a war zone. Pirates raided regularly. Hurricanes destroyed settlements, and foreign navies threatened invasion. Spain built fortresses at a few strategic ports like Veracruz, but only because ships had to dock somewhere. For everyday living, the smart money stayed inland, safe, cool, and far from danger. By the time the Industrial Revolution made shipping the backbone of global economics, Mexico's urban spine was already locked in place, and it pointed away from the sea. While other countries expanded toward their coasts, Mexico had already committed to an inland future. The colonial legacy ran deep. Even after independence in 1821, Mexico's new leaders, mostly from inland cities themselves, continued focusing resources on the interior. Roads, schools, and later railroads followed old colonial pathways, reinforcing the island-centric pattern that continues today. Here's something you might not have considered. Mexico has almost no navigable rivers for large-scale trade. This matters enormously. Think about the world's greatest coastal cities: New Orleans, London, Shanghai, Buenos Aires. Most grew where rivers met the sea, creating natural highways between inland regions and global trade. Mexico's rivers tell a different story. They're mostly short, steep, and fast-moving, dropping rapidly from mountains to coast. Perfect for adventure tourism, terrible for major transportation. While some rivers, like the Usumacinta, support limited local navigation, they cannot sustain large-scale trade routes. Even Mexico's longest river, the Rio Grande, functions more as a border with the United States than as an internal trade route. Without these natural arteries, early settlers and traders had no easy way to link inland regions with the coast. Transporting goods across rugged terrain was painfully slow and expensive. Ports became isolated islands, not the beating hearts of a growing economy. In effect, the ocean became a wall rather than a bridge. Coastal communities remained dependent on fishing or military presence rather than evolving into industrial or shipping centers. Even when railroads emerged in the 19th century, they weren't built primarily to serve inland mines and agricultural zones, not to boost coastal development. In countries where rivers connected interior economies to the sea, coasts naturally flourished. In Mexico, they remained beautiful but disconnected from the economic mainstream. Consider this contrast. The Mississippi River and its tributaries connect over 30 U.S. states to the Gulf of Mexico. Barges can travel thousands of miles inland, making cities like St. Louis and Memphis vital economic hubs despite being nowhere near the coast. Mexico has nothing comparable. No natural water highway that could have made coastal cities indispensable to the national economy. If geology and hydrology weren't obstacles enough, climate sealed the deal. Mexico's coasts face some of the most extreme weather conditions in the hemisphere. The Gulf and Caribbean coasts are hurricane highways, regularly battered by catastrophic storms that flatten entire regions. On the Pacific side, earthquakes, tsunamis, and tropical storms create constant threats. The entire coastline sits along one of the most seismically active zones on Earth. Natural disasters don't just destroy property, they deter investment. When cities must spend enormous resources just to survive the environment, it's nearly impossible to thrive economically. Insurance costs skyrocket, infrastructure requires constant rebuilding, and long-term planning becomes a fantasy. Over generations, a cultural understanding developed. Coastal areas are beautiful but dangerous. More stable, protected inland locations become logical places for major investment and development. The Central Highlands, shielded by mountains from hurricanes and experiencing fewer severe earthquakes, offered security that coastal regions simply couldn't match. As climate change accelerates, these risks are only increasing. Rising sea levels, more intense storms, and extreme heat will make Mexico's coastlines even more hazardous in the decades ahead. Nature itself has pushed Mexico's heartland away from its shores and continues to keep it there. The historical records are telling. Between 1970 and 2020, coastal Mexican states experienced over 40 major hurricanes. Cities like Cancun have been completely rebuilt multiple times. This cycle of destruction and rebuilding creates a persistent economic disadvantage that inland cities simply don't face. Even when geography and weather don't make coastal life difficult, infrastructure gaps finish the job. For centuries, development resources flowed inland, not toward the beaches. The Spanish built roads linking mines, farms, and highland cities, but barely connected the rugged coasts. This pattern locked in over generations. Large stretches of Mexico's coastlines remained accessible only by narrow, winding roads, or sometimes no roads at all. Without reliable transportation networks, coastal communities stayed isolated from national supply chains and markets. Today, despite significant improvements, the infrastructure gap remains substantial. Electricity coverage can be spotty, water systems inadequate, and transportation networks limited. Even famous destinations like Cancun strain under basic infrastructural challenges during peak seasons. Building and maintaining coastal infrastructure is enormously expensive. Power lines must withstand hurricane-force winds. Roads get washed out by flooding. Water often needs to be trucked in or extracted through expensive desalination. These costs make coastal development prohibitively expensive compared to expanding existing inland cities. Every missed road, bridge, or water pipeline is another anchor holding coastal growth back. For now, the story of Mexico's coasts remains one of gorgeous landscapes surrounded by logistical nightmares. Mexico's highway system reflects this disparity. While the country has around 4,500 miles of four-lane highways, the vast majority connects interior cities to each other and to the U.S. border. Coastal routes are less developed, meaning goods traveling to coastal areas face higher transportation costs and longer delays, making manufacturing and industrial development less competitive. Mexico's population patterns have also worked against coastal development. When people migrate from rural areas to cities in Mexico, they typically head for places like Mexico City, Guadalajara, or Monterrey, not the beaches. The Central Highlands have long been the economic, political, and educational core of the country. Universities, hospitals, government offices, and major corporations are concentrated inland. This creates a powerful gravitational pull, reinforcing the dominance of interior cities generation after generation. Coastal cities often offer fewer economic opportunities beyond tourism or fishing. These seasonal jobs tend to be lower paying, less stable, and heavily dependent on external factors like global travel trends. Meanwhile, manufacturing and technology sectors, which drive modern urban growth, are largely located far from the coast. Industrial corridors like El Bajío have exploded with growth, while coastal regions struggle to diversify their economies. Even successful coastal hubs like Cancun remain specialized in tourism rather than developing broader economic activities. Tourism can create boom periods, but rarely sustains large, complex urban economies over the long term. In effect, Mexico's coasts have remained secondary zones rather than becoming full-scale economic anchors for the nation. The numbers tell the story. Mexico City's metropolitan area alone is home to over 21 million people, roughly 17% of Mexico's entire population. Add in other major inland cities like Guadalajara, Monterrey, Puebla, and León, and you've accounted for nearly a third of all Mexicans. By contrast, no coastal city ranks among the country's 5 largest urban centers. This concentration creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Businesses locate where the population is densest. People move where jobs are most plentiful. Infrastructure follows both. The result is an economic center of gravity that pulls steadily away from the coast. In recent decades, another factor has complicated coastal development: security. Many of Mexico's coastal regions have become hotspots for organized crime and drug trafficking. Cartels value access to ports and isolated coastlines for smuggling operations. Places like Acapulco have seen tourism decline as violence has increased. For businesses and residents alike, security concerns create yet another reason to prefer inland locations. Major manufacturing investments favor areas with stronger institutional presence and lower crime rates, typically found in the industrial corridor stretching from Mexico City to the US border. Even tourism, the economic lifeblood of many coastal regions, becomes vulnerable when security deteriorates. International travel warnings can devastate local economies almost overnight. The government has deployed significant security forces to protect major tourist destinations, but vast stretches of coastline remain under-policed and vulnerable. This creates another disincentive for major investment along many parts of Mexico's shores. The problem is cyclical. Economic opportunities decline, legitimate businesses pull back, and illicit activities fill the void. Breaking this cycle requires sustained investment in both security and economic development, resources that have historically flowed to the interior. Could Mexico's coastline boom in the future? It's possible. The government has launched ambitious infrastructure projects like the Maya Train, designed to boost development along the Yucatan. New ports, highways, and energy projects are emerging across both coasts. Tourism continues to drive growth in select regions, particularly along the Caribbean. And as global shipping expands, Mexico's strategic position between Asia and the Americas creates new opportunities for port development. But enormous challenges remain. Climate change threatens coastal areas with rising seas, stronger storms, and water insecurity. Land disputes, environmental concerns, and financing gaps often stall major projects. And culturally, Mexico still orients itself inland. Its political, economic, and social centers remain firmly anchored in the highlands, especially Mexico City, which continues to dominate national life. The coasts matter, but they're unlikely to rival the interior anytime soon. Some coastal regions have shown promising growth. The Riviera Maya has transformed from jungle to international tourism powerhouse in just a few decades. Ensenada's port facilities continue expanding to support global trade. Cities like Mazatlan are reinventing themselves with improved infrastructure and security. But these developments remain limited in scale compared to the massive urban expansion happening inland. Mexico City continues adding roughly 100,000 to 150,000 new residents annually, more than the entire population of many coastal cities. So why is Mexico's coastline so empty? It's a perfect storm of geography, history, and economics that push development away from the shore. Mountainous terrain and difficult geography made coastal building challenging. Colonial priorities established cities inland. The lack of navigable rivers disconnected coasts from interior economies. Natural disasters made coastlines dangerous investments. Infrastructure gaps isolated coastal communities, and population patterns reinforced the dominance of inland urban centers. Today, Mexico has thousands of miles of coastline, much of it quiet, rural, and undeveloped. It's both a hidden strength and a missed opportunity. Will that change in the coming decades? It's possible, but for now, Mexico remains a nation where the heart beats far from the shore. In many ways, this pattern defies global trends. As climate change progresses, some predict that inland areas of Mexico may face increasing water scarcity, potentially shifting demographic patterns toward the coast. The ongoing expansion of remote work could also make coastal living more viable for professionals who previously needed to stay close to urban job centers. Yet, history suggests that geographic patterns, once established, are remarkably persistent. The gravitational pull of Mexico's inland cities, their infrastructure, institutions, and economies represent centuries of accumulated investment that coastal regions simply cannot match. What do you think? Should Mexico invest more in its coastlines, or is the inland model still the better bet? Let me know in the comments below.